Chapter 8 The Watchtower. Master Torin. Master Torin's dark brown eyes did not hold light, only grim reality. He did not smile, he did not laugh, and he never slept. On this night, Master Torin sat in the cold tower on top of Dragon Mount and gazed out toward the ocean. The waves shimmered like black diamonds beneath the full moon. Torin did not look at the moon. He did not want to see its face. So many faces, so many faces. Too often he saw someone that was dead. But it wasn't them. They could never come back. And then the night was disturbed by the sound of the creaking ladder below. Torin reached for his crossbow. "You're awake," Torin grunted. Torin rarely talked, but he did so sparingly, and one of the ways to avoid conversations was to beat Simmons from stating the painfully obvious, and to put a cork into the endless questions. Simmons grimaced as he bonked his head on the low ceiling and closed the trapdoor below him, and crouched until he was able to make himself comfortable on a wooden bench across from Torin, and pulled out his spyglass. The silhouette of a black wing strafed across the moon like an obsidian blade. "I can't sleep with that drake flying around," Simmons grunted, and then frowned as he noticed the crossbow. "Cora said you have been carrying that around all over the place," Simmons remarked. Torin said nothing. He just sat there, a big black mountain of deafening silence. Simmons' focus quickly turned back toward the dragon. "It's massive, twice as big as Rex. I've never seen a bull drake so big," he marveled with dread and awe. "It's like it's just waiting for one of us to fly out," he scowled. "That's because it is," Torin grunted, and passed over a flask to Simmons. Simmons knocked it back. Only a few drops of hard drink came out. "It's empty." "I know," he grunted agitatedly. Simmons smirked, took out his own flask, and poured a shot of hard drink and handed it back. "On the house," he chuckled. Torin quickly emptied it and gave a nod of appreciation, and then the deafening silence continued, disturbed by the distant, powerful, pulsing great wings beating off in the distance. Simmons let out a heavy sigh and turned south toward Founder's Keep. Founder's Keep housed the mages and their collective guilds, whom guarded and protected their sacred library, while Dragonhall was part of the same mountain fortress. Founder's Keep was kept separate. It was a steep, winding stone staircase down to the grassy basin where Dragonhall had its own small slice of real estate walled off and guarded at all times. Founder's Keep didn't want any of their apprentice mages from sneaking out, and Dragonhall didn't want them sneaking in. Simmons turned his focus to the east, to the great and wonderfully prosperous Glendon City. Glendon was the largest port city in the nation. It was the capital and the heart of all of Marn. "The last thing we need is for that dragon to go romping around downtown or try to make a nest on top of Founder's Keep. The Overseer wouldn't like that one bit." Simmons grinned when he heard Torin let out a soft, rumbling chuckle, but that was all he could coax from him, and so he went on, resuming the awkward, one-sided conversation. "It would be easier for us if it did. Savell would smite the thing with lightning," he added. She would smite us if it torched her school, Torn warned. Simmons' smile faded. The thought was a sobering one. He did not fear Lady Savelle, but the thought of failing to protect Founders twisted his guts up into knots. Being a mage himself, he had a soft spot toward Founders Keep. Simmons let out a heavy, grim sigh. He knew Torn was right. There was no telling what the feral drake would do once it got tired of trying to get into their colony and get after their hen drakes. Right now, it was waiting to swoop down and pounce on them the moment they went out to take off from the landing platform at the main cave entrance. The same thing happened to Nora. She had been unlucky to survive. Simmons wondered if he had been knocked off his own dragon, if he would have been able to swim with all this gear on. It probably wouldn't even matter. The fall was so far down, and the rocks, those jagged rocks waiting at the bottom, that's what would do him in. He remembered finding one of the female recruits, spotting her bloated, broken body bobbing up and down. Supposedly, one night she had left from the landing bridge. Many recruits simply quit. Many could not stand waiting for so many years. Some recruits quit sooner than others, but she had been so close, and had been so promising. She reminded him of Nora. He never could have imagined that she would ever end her life. Simmons wished he had spent more time with her. Perhaps just a hint of encouragement might have been enough to keep her from losing hope. Maybe we can go down to Founders and grab a few good field mages that specialize in destructive elemental magic, he suggested. Were you planning on tickling it with fire? Torn grunted. What should we do then? Simmons asked. Same thing as we always do. Send out a goat or a piglet onto the landing platform, lure it down, and shoot it from afar, Torn insisted. Simmons grimaced as he tried to take another look with his spyglass. He couldn't find it anymore, but he could hear it. He could hear the wings circling overhead like the sound of a sharp sigh slicing through wheat. I know a few mages that are good with lightning, he offered. A well-placed bolt from a ballista will work just as well. Besides, I've seen weather mages in action. They're just as likely to strike any one of us as they are what they're aiming for. Besides, I don't need Sybil over here telling us what to do and how to do it. This is our outpost. This is our job. We are supposed to deal with dragons and to patrol the coast. We aren't doing any of that while we're locked down. Besides, we have our own mages. That's why we recruit them, remember? That's gotta be a record-long conversation. Simmons congratulated him, then immediately regretted it as Torn didn't respond. Thrash, thrash, went the wings, cutting the stillness like a knife. And this painful silence continued. Thanks for the drink, Torn said at last. Any time. Simmons paused as Torn held out his empty flask again. Simmons rolled his eyes, but just as he was about to humor his friend, the alarm bell rang out, loud and fast. The slow ring was a drill. This was not a drill. Torn lurched out of his chair. Sons of Maltine! What could it be this time? He cursed. Simmons felt his stomach churn. His thoughts immediately went to Ben, and he dreaded what he might find. Chapter 9. Night Watch is coming up next. And I just wanted to remind you that subscribing to the channel is 100% free, and you might miss the more stories, more chapters that I'll be uploading. Thank you so much for pressing the like button and your comments. The more feedback that I get on stories, the more likely I will upload quicker, because I know people want to hear more, and that means a whole lot. And have a wonderful day. Chapter 9. Night Watch. Ben sighed as he followed the line of fuzzy heads into the dining hall. After he had eaten, his body ached for his bed, and then he remembered that he was assigned to the nightly fire watch crew. It was a simple enough job. Actually, one of the better ones. Ben would have gladly traded it for working in the burn pits, but pulling double shifts wasn't his idea of fun. What he wanted to do was what everyone did: find a small broom closet and sleep while a friend stood watch. But he had to keep focused and keep his mind sharp. "Your face is all blackened," Meg giggled. Ben arched his brow and glared at her through his bloodshot eyes. "And you smell like you've been swimming in bog water," he rasped. May's smile vanished, and then she flung her cup of water into his face. By the time Ben could clear his eyes, May had already stomped off. "Ouch, I think she likes you," Milo chuckled. "Shut up, Milo," he growled. Milo grinned. A cloud of dust went everywhere as he patted Ben on the back, causing an uproar around the table as wood ash came raining down on everyone's stew. "She's just jealous you made the list," he sighed. "What list?" Ben asked. "You know," Milo winked. "The short list. We both saw it," he added. Ben grinned. "Oh yeah, but don't tell anybody," he insisted. Brumir turned around and tapped Ben on the shoulder. "What list?" he demanded. Ben sighed. "Did you tell him to? I haven't told nobody nothing about no hatchlings," Milo scowled. Brumir's eyes went big. "Oh, Sprigga, be praised," he exclaimed as he quickly moved over to Ben's table and leaned in close. "When are the hatchlings coming?" he asked. Ben shook his head. "Not the foggiest, but I saw the short list," he declared. "Who's on it? Did I make it? Did you see my name?" Brumir asked. "Ha! Please, Brumir, you've only been here a year," Milo scoffed. "Longer than you," Brumir huffed. "Did you make it, Ben?" Brumir asked. Ben gave a modest shrug and took a sip of his black tea. "Jason left me his bag of merit stones before he left, so yeah, I'm on it." Milo cursed. "Wait, what? That's what the merit stones were used for? I was spending them all on the commissary," he exclaimed. Brumir gasped. Me too. I didn't know. I thought you could save them up for leave after 2 years, but I didn't know you could move up on the listings. When did they do that?" he demanded. "Recently. It's a new policy they're putting in," Simmons told me. "I'm never going to be chosen," Brumir groaned. "Well, you might," Milo encouraged, clearly starting to feel a little guilty, but not guilty enough to end the prank. Brumir shook his head. "How? I haven't been saving." "Well, Ben could always pull a Molly," Milo laughed. "That's not funny," Ben snapped. "Yeah, what's wrong with you, Milo?" Brumir demanded. Sorry. I'm just saying it was sort of fishy, was all. But nobody listens to me. I'm not as smart as I look. I mean, yeah, whatever, you know what I mean." He shrugged and went back to eating his stew. Ben shook his head. "Milo, you're making people paranoid. Do you really think somebody pushed her in?" Milo shrugged. "Well, if you ask me, seems to be a lot of accidents happening lately," he grunted. "You mean more than normal?" Brumir laughed. "Well, do you remember when Master Warren went missing?" Milo asked. Ben shrugged. "Yes, his saddle came loose. But he is all right. And that could happen to anyone." Milo rolled his eyes. "And do you remember what happened to Tara?" Ben was silent. "I thought she jumped off the landing platform." Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. Did you hear about a suicide note?" he asked. Ben shook his head. Broomer's eyes went big and he leaned in with concern. You could be in danger, Ben. You shouldn't tell anybody about the short list, he advised in a sincerely low, worried whisper. Ben pensively gripped his wooden spoon and glanced down at his stew. Suddenly, he didn't feel so hungry anymore. Milo, why didn't you tell me about this before we started talking about the list? He asked, agitatedly. Milo gave him a perplexed look. I thought that's what you wanted. I mean, it's brave. I just wouldn't have the guts to stick out my neck like that. He laughed nervously. Thanks, you're both our wonderful friends, Ben grunted. But somehow he felt better that Jason had left the hall. He could only imagine if someone went to the lengths of offing people, they weren't going to just up and leave. Not after doing all that. Broomer didn't have the temperament or the mindset to pull off something so diabolical even if he wanted to. And Milo? Ben wondered. No, Milo was a goofball, and he hadn't been around long enough to get that discouraged or to start offing fellow recruits. If anything, he was desperate to make friends. Milo was a lonely loudmouth who practically screamed for attention. What Ben was looking for was most likely a jaded senior recruit that was silently seething with hatred. Come to think of it, Ben glanced around. There were a lot of those. He might have suspected himself. More than he wanted to admit, Ben was always hesitant to make friends. He wasn't ever sure how long they would stick around. Then there were those who thought they could get ahead by making everyone around them look terrible. The snitches and backbiters. Well, I guess I'm safe. I'm still new, and I squandered all my stones on candles and on parchment and ink, Broomer chuckled, and then looked worriedly over toward Ben. I could stay up and keep watch with you if you're worried, he offered. Ben quickly shook his head. I'll be all right. Part of him felt a little uneasy about Broomer's willingness to help look out for him. Broomer was from Barlington, a big, well-fed farm boy who had run off and wanted to see the world, and most of all, dragons. He never suspected Broomer of doing anything to hurt anybody, and therefore everybody suspected him of being up to something. Broomer was just too friendly and too helpful. Then again, Ben had grown up in Silvertine, a province with precious metals and gems, which attracted a whole lot of crime. Milo patted him on the shoulder. Don't worry about it, Ben. You're huge. Plus, you're a mage. Whoever is doing this is a slimy weasel. They wouldn't ever try to take you on, he encouraged. Ben smiled. His abilities weren't exactly helpful in fighting. He couldn't call down lightning or control fire like some mages could, but he could heat up metal and was fairly good at alchemy. Gold was tricky. He could do it, but it would leave a unique elemental signature behind. Besides, just because you could do something didn't make it easy or right. As far as he was concerned, it wasn't worth the trouble or the attention. Ben hadn't ever told anyone about this. That was one of the reasons he had been sent to Founder's Keep, to be trained as a mage in the first place. It was either that or serving a hard time breaking rocks. The sentence at the time seemed rather excessive for turning copper pennies into gold. Well, copper-plated, anyway. Ben couldn't ever turn the whole coin into gold, but the very thin outer surface, and the magic needed would cause the metal to heat up, and the finer the metal was, the closer he had to be to it, and it took more time, concentration, and energy. If he wanted to turn a whole copper or silver coin into pure gold, it would be a grueling 12-hour process, and if he didn't manage to cause a fire, die of heat stroke, or go blind from the light, You'd be very sick and have horrible vertigo for days after. Not to mention, the reward for turning over lawbreakers to the authority was far more than he could ever make. And whatever you do, Milo whispered conspiratorially, don't fall asleep, he teased before wandering off to the barracks. Ben shook his head. Milo was always a clown. He tried to remember what he looked like before coming into the hall. A big mess of hair going every which way. The hair was gone now, but his goofy grin and wild green eyes remained. He always stuck out like an obnoxious red buoy in a sea of fuzz. No, Milo couldn't get away with anything, which was unfortunate, as he was always up to some sort of mischief or practical joke. But that idiot grin always gave him away. Ben couldn't help but find this oddly endearing, but only time would tell if Milo would stick around long enough to form any kind of meaningful friendship. It was easy to get discouraged. Everyone always left eventually. Once curfew came around, Ben wandered into the lounge where the lanterns were distributed amongst the blurry-eyed recruits. You're with me, Ben. We'll patrol the east wing, Roran declared. Ben yawned and gave a nod and followed along. You look tired, Roran remarked. Ben nodded. Yeah, I was in the burn pits all day, he croaked. I can take first watch, Roran offered. Ben shook his head. Nah, you go ahead. I got a lot on my mind, he replied. Roran shrugged. Suit yourself. I wouldn't be able to sleep if I were you either, he remarked. What do you mean by that? Ben asked. Roran smirked. If I was put on the short list, I wouldn't be able to sleep either. It must be nice being a mage, getting preferences over other folks who have been here forever. I didn't know they did that, Ben remarked. He glanced over toward Roran. Then he felt a little bit better. Roran seemed fairly scrawny, and not that much of a threat. Bitter, yes. Potential creeper that might want to murder him while his back was turned? Perhaps. But Ben wasn't worried about him trying anything, at least not tonight. Well, it only makes sense. They keep changing the rules to pick out their favorites. When you've been around as long as some of us have been, you see it happen all the time, Roran grunted. Don't get discouraged. Master Torn and Morn aren't mages. You'll make it, Ben assured him. Ha! Yeah. I'm sure Warren Fox made it. His father is the senator of Glendon Province, Roran scowled. My father works in the mines in Silvertine. My family isn't wealthy at all, Ben reasoned. And Torn wasn't in the infantry, and he's missing half his face, he added. Roran was silent for a moment. Yeah, I suppose Master Torn is all right, he agreed, and then paused. You're a bit big for a mage. You could have been a guardian, he chuckled. Ben gave a shrug. It wasn't exactly a choice. How do you mean? Oh, I get in a bit of trouble. So is either founders or hard labor breaking rocks, he laughed. Well, you're not all that bad either, I guess, Roran chuckled. I suppose you had to be pretty powerful, huh? Ben shook his head. No, I wish. I never could get the hang of the heavy elemental magic, he lamented. Oh, no lightning bolts or fireballs, huh? Well, that's too bad, Roran chuckled as he pulled out a long loaf of bread and offered it up for him to pull off a piece. I snuck a little something from the kitchens, he declared with a grin. That's all right. I don't like eating while near the stables, Ben insisted. Roran smiled. You're pretty smart for a tough guy, he laughed as he stuffed it back into his shirt and unbolted the heavy door. Looks like everything's quiet. Yep, Ben agreed. But just when he turned around, he found himself trapped by two heavy-set, rough, middle-aged recruits. Who else is on the short list? Jasper demanded. Jasper wasn't at all the sort Ben wanted to cross, judging by the scars and tattoos on his arm. He had lived a very colorful life on the ocean before coming to the Hall. K-Bar, on his left, sported a similar sleeve, and his face was scarred, and he had one ripped ear. But it was not their tattoos or their muscles that scared Ben. It was the heavy crossbow in Jasper's hand. Ben nervously moved away from the stairs. "What list?" he asked. Roran walloped him over the back of the head. Ben cursed as he was sent tumbling forward. Before he could recover, Jasper kicked him in the face. "Grab his feet, K-Bar," Jasper commanded. A ragged groan was all Ben could manage to protest as he was dragged into the middle of the stables. "Hey! Leave him alone!" Broomer bellowed from the top of the steps and came rounding the Ben, brandishing a spear. Before Ben could call out, Jasper turned and loosed the bolt. Broomer fell back, gulping for air as blood flooded into his lungs. "Damn it! Throw him in as well!" Roran snapped. "Yeah! What?" K-Bar howled. "My belt! My pants! My belt!" he yammered as he began running about frantically as the hot metal turned bright red, burning away the leather belt and trousers until they fell away. Roran ran forward and gave a jump kick to Ben's ribs, causing him to lose focus on the casting the spell. Roran came again with another vicious kick, but Ben latched onto his leg and bit down onto the tendons, growling like a pit bull as he tore into flesh and muscle. Before Jasper or K-Bar could leap upon him with their drawn daggers, Ben had Roran onto the ground and thrashing about, obstructing their view in the cloud of ashes. Roran howled as his ankle was shattered, but before Ben could rise, K-Bar pounced on top of him. Ben saw the flash of steel, and then heard a wailing, shrieking roar. Ben and K-Bar turned. Milo came barreling into the stables and rammed the heavy, leaf-shaped boar spear through K-Bar's torso. K-Bar's screams were cut off abruptly by the horrible snapping of jaws. In an instant, Rex separated K-Bar's head from his shoulders and disappeared into his stall. The dragon thrummed happily as he proceeded to crack open the skull like a nutcracker on winter's day. K-Bar's headless body continued to scream, continued to howl, until finally Ben ran out of breath and realized the shrieks were coming from himself. Finally, the alarm bells began to ring. Roran and Jasper bolted. Ben snarled as he came up from behind Roran and shoved him headfirst into the stone archway, knocking him out cold, and continued up the stairs. Jasper spun around and slashed at him with his dagger. Ben ignored the horrible laceration on his chest and tackled him to the ground, and they began the life and death struggle for the knife as they thrashed about on the stairs. "Filthy mage scum!" Jasper snarled as he clawed at Ben's eyes. Ben cursed as he was forced to turn his head to keep from being permanently maimed, and quickly captured Jasper's index finger, singling it out for destruction. He snapped it back, breaking it like a dried reed. The knife clattered to the ground, and Ben laid into him with all his strength and hatred, weeping and snarling with blood and snot running out of his nose as he rained fists down, beating Jasper's head into the stone step until he stopped moving, over and over again, until Milo's broken sobs of rage and anguish brought him back to his senses. Oh gods, Broomer, Broomer!" Milo wept. Ben looked up. Milo cradled Broomer in his arms. Broomer's bloody body lay twitching, the heels of his worn-out shoes weakly scraping at the stone steps as he fought for breath. Ben shakily crawled over toward them and put his hands onto his friend's shoulder. Milo turned and pulled Ben down. Help him! Milo pleaded. Ben's voice was hoarse from the smoke and strangled with anger, despair, and fatigue. "Stretcher! We need a stretcher! We need to get to Mender's Hall," Ben rasped. "But you're a mage, Milo insisted. Ben struggled to focus. There wasn't much he could do. Founder's Keep didn't exactly train mages how to channel after getting punched in the face. That sort of thing was typically reserved for the sword companions. Hold 'em still, Ben instructed. Milo quickly nodded, and Ben held his breath as he focused on the iron bodkin tip until the metal glowed hot, and he looked up at the ceiling. "Sprigga, help me," he prayed. The flesh crackled and smoked, sizzled like putrid bacon as he pulled the bolt out of Brumir's chest. Brumir's eyes fluttered open, and he let out a strangled gurgle as he fell in and out of consciousness. "Is he going to die?" Milo asked. "Not if we get him to Mender's Hall in time. Run ahead. Get help. Get a stretcher. I'll be right behind you," Ben panted as he draped Brumir over his shoulder and hurried back up the stairs. Chapter 10. Mender's Hall. Bong! Bong! Rang the alarm bell. Torn grabbed the recruit. "What's happening? What's going on?" he demanded. "People talk better when their feet are on the ground, Master Torn," Magicora exclaimed as she came running around the corner with her staff at the ready. "It's all right. Breathe. Tell us what your name is, and tell us what's going on," Simmons encouraged. "Gimbals! My name is Gimbals. Milo told me to bring the bell," he exclaimed. Right as he said this, Milo rounded the corner. His eyes were wild with terror and panic. Master Cora attempted to intercept him, but he pushed past her. But he was quickly snagged by Torn. "Speak!" he barked. "They attacked Ben! We tried to stop him, but they shot him! They shot him! Brumir's dying!" Milo wailed. Simmons cursed, and he took off and sprinted toward the stables. When he rounded the corner, he found Ben and hurried over to help ease Brumir down onto the stretcher. "Ben, what happened? Who did this?" Simmons demanded. Master Torn quickly took charge. "Out of the way! Move! Simmons, secure the stables! Cora, see to the dragons! Horn! Security check!" he commanded. "Move!" he growled. Both the rider and bald-headed recruits got out of the way. Ben didn't have the strength or time to speak. He looked wildly about as Milo helped hoist Brumir up. Thankfully, Torrin stepped in. The big man's voice boomed throughout the halls, and every recruit within earshot plastered themselves to the wall as they ran through the mountain fortress until they came to the winding steps that led down toward the mountainside towards Founder's Keep. "Easy, easy," Torrin cautioned. Keep it steady. Let's not do more damage by dropping him." "It's all my fault," Milo sobbed. "I'll flog you for it later. Now shut up and keep moving," Torn barked. Ben panted raggedly as they moved their way down the steps and onto the grassy hillside. Normally the guards at the gate would have stopped them, but one look at Master Torn and the guards quickly opened the heavy doors and allowed them to pass without being bothered with formalities. It had not been the first time Dragonhall had to run their injured out to Mender's. Ben wished Mender's was closer to the north point of the eight-sided Star Fortress instead of on the far southern end. There had been a lot of heated debate over whether it should have been closer to the hall or the sparring yards, but after the incident with Nora Frey and the mender who had died trying to save her dragon, any thoughts of attempting to persuade them to trade wings was out of the question. Being a mage, Ben knew it was faster to go around than cut through the maze inside, even if it looked faster on paper. And so he led them around the western wing, through the garden path, which was created and maintained by the green mages who specialized in harmony magic. While it was the same distance on either side, he knew many instructors would be on the west wing. "Oh, God, help me! What happened?" Nims exclaimed as she hurried over to examine Brumir. Milo and Ben eased the stretcher and knelt on the grass, gasping for air. "He was shot by a crossbow. Ben took the bolt out," Milo explained. Nims muttered under her breath as she took her scissors and removed his shirt. and began searching for the wound. "You fools! You fools! You should have left it in!" she exclaimed, and then paused and spotted the horrible burn where it had been cauterized. Nims let out a sigh of relief as she placed her hand over top of Brumir's chest. Brumir's eyes snapped open and he lurched upward and let out a guttural wailing howl. "Help me keep him down," Nims pleaded. Torn quickly knelt beside the injured recruit and forced him back down. Brumir stared up into Torn's horribly disfigured face and cold, black, beady eyes. "Milo, Ben, Mom! Let him breathe!" Nims snapped. "Sorry," Torn apologized and quickly removed his large, gnarled hands from Brumir's mouth. Brumir's dark brown eyes darted about. He stared first at Master Torn, and then relaxed when he looked toward the tranquilly calm Magi Nims. Even though her black hair was peppered in silver strands, she was very well put together for a woman of her age. "You're safe. You'll need a lot of bed rest. No burn pits, and don't pick up anything heavy for a few weeks," she announced, her sharp blue eyes directing the statement toward Master Torn. "Thank you, Magi Nims." "Oof!" Brumir groaned as Torn pushed him back down. "That's an order, not a suggestion," he snapped. Nims smiled. "Thank you, Master Torn. These foolhardy recruits will be far more careful if I had you around. Do come and visit more often," she insisted with a warm smile as he helped her struggle up to her feet. "Do you like scones?" she asked. "No." Nim stuck up her nose and took up her blue dress. "Then you can't have any," she sniffed. "Come on, bring the walking wounded," she instructed. Torn glanced down toward the three recruits. Brumir gulped. Milo grinned and looked toward Ben. "She means you, shovelhead," he chuckled. Ben blinked. "But I'm fine," he insisted. Torn chuckled. "How many fingers am I holding up?" he asked. Ben's eyes went big when he saw Torn's disfigured right hand. "8 1/2, he ventured. Torn's large fingers and nubs crackled as they balled up into a menacing fist. "How many now?" Ben's crooked grin fell away, and he quickly pivoted around and began marching toward Mender's Hall. "Sit over there, and take off your shirt, and try not to bleed all over the place," Nims instructed. "I'm not bleeding," Ben chuckled. "I suppose you don't have a concussion either," Nims remarked. "But I'm fine," he insisted. But the moment he took off his shirt, he saw the horrible bloody gash that snaked across his neck and down his collarbone. Milo grinned as he stuffed another jelly-filled scone into his mouth. "You know, you should work on getting better at dodging things like knives and fists and shovels," he advised. "Sons of Maltine, what happened?" Torn demanded. "Magi Simmons wanted me to find out who the bastards were that were messing with the locks in the stables. So I was put on the night shift, and then I got jumped. I would have been dragon food if it wasn't for Milo and Brumir," Ben explained. Milo and Brumir nodded. "Simmons put you three up to this?" Torn demanded. Milo and Brumir pointed toward Ben. Ben gulped. Does this mean we don't get to go flying?" he asked worriedly. Right then Simmons came running in. Torn let out an agitated grunt, his dark, beady brown eyes locked onto his friend. "How's everybody?" Simmons asked. Nims glanced over from the counter of herbs and spices and gave him a cold, accusatory stink-eye as she nodded toward Ben's massive laceration and star-crossed, battered face. "Gods, that's nasty," Simmons gasped, and then turned and smiled at Brumir. "Glad to see you're doing better," he encouraged, and turned toward Torn. "All is well at Dragon Hall. Rex had a bit of a snack. There is blood all over the place. But from what I can gather from the dragons, you boys are some tough sons of Maltine. Glad to have you with us," he declared. "Did you need a broken leg?" Torn asked with a grim sarcasm, but his voice held no laughter. Simmons blinked. He sensed the tension, the smoldering rage fuming from his friend. "Would you like to talk outside?" he ventured. Without a word, Torn stomped outside and spun around, pointing a nubby finger into Simmons' chest. "What were you thinking?" he demanded. "I wasn't expecting this. I was only trying to find out information. You have no idea what those bastards were up to. All just to get up the stupid list. They killed Molly. Did you know that? Who knows, they may have even tampered with Warren's saddle. Other good recruits have gotten injured, run off, or disappeared," he insisted. "Idiot! If you had told us, one of us could have been there. Why did you send them alone?" Torn demanded. "We have other things to worry about, like that bloody bulldrake flying about. Do you remember what happened to Nora?" he demanded. Torn grunted and pulled at his flask. It was empty. He cursed and launched it into the nearby pond. Simmons handed over his own flask. Torn snatched it and quickly guzzled it down, and then chucked it into the pond as well. "Feel better?" Simmons asked. Torn braced his hands on his hips and took a deep breath, and then let it go. "Yeah." "Tomorrow morning I will lure it out," Simmons declared. "Oh, no, you don't. I'm not letting you dissolve your guilty conscience that easy," Torn growled. "What do we do then?" Simmons asked. "We'll keep it simple and send a goat out and shoot it from the archway above," he insisted. Simmons grimaced. "It's a big drag, Torn. It's got to be at least 100 years old. And all the more reason not to be sending anybody out. We can lose a goat, not another dragon rider," Torn advised. "Yeah. But I still think we need some kind of second plan." "A second plan can't hurt," Torn agreed. "Just in case if things went wrong, we could try to convince Adar to help us finish it off. He's a weather mage, and then we won't have to go to Founders. It will be settled in the house," he added quickly. "Weather mages have to be outside under open skies," Torn growled irritatedly. "Well, I wouldn't let him go out alone. I will lead a group of senior recruits with shields and spears, and—" "Really? Spears? Iron-tipped poles and lightning. Do you know how I got my burns? Simmons, have I ever told you the story how I got all my scars?" Simmons frowned. "Lightning?" "A weather mage in a bloody spear formation," Torn snapped at him. Simmons ran his hands through his hair and looked down at the ground. "Damn it. I didn't. "No, you didn't, did you? You didn't think. None of you mages ever think. You always run in with a wand in one hand and your other hand up your back pocket looking for glitter and not a clue what's going on around them. You just hide behind everybody and call down lightning," he growled. I get it. But I haven't heard any plan B from you yet, because I don't think that big, ugly, feral bulldrake is going to be happy after you shoot him," Simmons growled back at him. Torn braced his hands on his hips and shambled about and kicked a rock out of his path. His dark brown eyes glanced about, clearly frustrated. "We'll finish it off with crossbows." "If you can't take it out with a bolt from a ballista, a bunch of little pointy sticks is only going to take it off. And when it gets inside, and it will, what do we do then? How do we stop it from getting into the stables?" Simmons demanded. Torn's nostrils flared as he paced about. Well, fine. If it wants in, we'll let it in." "So we'll let it in? Are you nuts?" Simmons exploded. Torn let out a mad cackle and grinned, a big, white, toothy, menacing grin. "We'll build a trap, Simmons," he declared. "We are not letting that inside. It would wipe out the whole colony," he protested. "Not if we block it off. We'll carve out the floor. It will fall in, and we'll be able to finish it off with spears nice and quick," Torn explained. "Torn, It's solid granite. That'll take months at best. We can't wait that long, Simmons ranted, and then his eyes lit up. Unless we have a mage that could alter the rock into something soft, like sandstone, Torn grinned. Now this is a plan I like, he agreed, and gave his friend a hearty slap on the shoulders. Son of Maltine, this is going to be a long night, and even a longer day. Simmons chuckled. I suppose we better check on our alchemist. Torn tilted his head. Is that what it's called? I thought alchemy was turning metals into gold. Simmons grinned as he leaned forward and picked up a stone and tossed it into the air. Ha ha! I imagined it's closely related. Turning one rock into another should be simple enough. Hello. I'm the author of Founder's Keep. I'm an independent writer, and if you like what I'm doing and want to help me out, please like and subscribe to the channel. And it's not easy being an independent writer, but your encouragement makes a world of a difference.